Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions, where we have a mission to wake the world up to what's possible. And here today to help me with that mission is the lead author of a new book we have coming out, Miss Kristi Trader. Welcome. How are you doing
Thank you,
today?
Laura. I'm doing well, thank you.
So we got this book going on called EmbodyKind, a guide for authentic living. And let me tell you a little bit about Kristi. Kristi Trader designs custom experiences for all ages with the intent of embodying kindness in ourselves, others, and our communities. EmbodyKind is a transformative movement that encourages us all to become an expression of consideration, friendliness, affection, and love. She believes that we are already perfect and whole just as we are. In every moment, at home, at work, or in our communities, we should all feel free to live authentically as ourselves. I love this movement, Kristi. Tell me a little bit about your story. How did you get started with the EmbodyKind movement?
Yeah, so it started kind of as a thesis in my graduate program, and I was working with happiness and life satisfaction in the workplace. And as I was doing this, I found out that work was not working for me. And I was actually working on this as my own project. And I had this whole list of if onlys, like if only everybody else would change, if only everybody else would switch something, like maybe it would work for me. And what I really found out was that maybe it was me that needed to do something different. And what I found that different thing was being kind to myself. I really found that I was overworking myself. I wasn't around my family enough. I wasn't really enjoying my kids enough. I wasn't all of these things that we kind of say we're going to maybe like do later in life. Like we have this plan for like when I reach 40 or 60 or whatever the age is that we're going to do. And I realized that that time might not come. And what would I do if that time didn't come? And, I think we have those realizations sometimes when we say, well, I'm going to do that tomorrow. And, I don't know why I was lucky enough to have that realization and to be able to make some changes in my life, but I was. And so what I realized in my project as I kept moving forward after my thesis was that it really was less about happiness and satisfaction and more about this idea of kindness. And how are we kind to ourselves? How are we kind to others? And how are we kind in certain spaces? So I noticed how are we kind in our homes? How are we kind in our workplace? How are we kind at our schools? How are we kind in our communities? And it really kind of grew from there. And so that's kind of the foundation of where it started.
Man, you're talking about really other level awareness. I mean, all of those moments you had to be kind of awake to those realizations, and it had to hit you like, oh, wait a minute. Am I really blaming everyone else? And I mean, what can I do here? Right? What do I have control over? So the awareness is such a gift. So thank you for sharing what yours were. The book and this stellar group of co-authors that you have put together who are stepping up to share these stories, and they're really their master teachings about EmbodyKind. I guess I just wanted to say a thank you to all of you. If you're listening, we appreciate you for being here. What else do you want to say about them and this group of people?
Oh my gosh. Well, so of course, we call them co-authors, but I have endearingly called my group co-stars because I really believe each one of them really is stars. Are stars, I guess, would be the right terminology, but they're really such amazing people. And the way that this book has come together, I've been so excited about because they are so vulnerable in telling their own stories as to how they came to be kind either to themselves or to other people, or how they're using kindness in their own work. And it's just such an amazing way in which they chose to open up themselves to the world, and not know who might open this book and who might read their story, and then not only share that, but then also share, so here's some steps as to how I got to that point and how you can get to that point. And so I've just been so blown away by each one of them. And I think what was even more amazing for me was that some of these people I knew intimately going into this project. And then to read their story and to read their practice after the fact, I was like, what? Like that is part of you? And I didn't even know that. So that was just really fantastic to be able to come to know people on an even more rich and deep level. Yeah, a super thank you to all of them for just being such amazing beings and for opening up their stories to the world.
Yeah, it's takes a warrior really to say yes to, sharing your story in this way. And
Yeah.
Kristi and I both recognize all of you for being that kind of person. So thank you for saying yes and for writing so brilliantly and really being vulnerable. So, what happens is we create a community with these projects, and the project itself, but even your bigger community, my bigger community of people who are out there really trailblazing this kind of storytelling and helping people with it. This is that community oriented movement. EmbodyKind is that for you. Talk to me about how people can begin to help build their own community, maybe if they don't feel like they already have one. I know this is an important topic for you.
Yeah. Just like you said, I think that it starts in your own community. I think that it starts small. And so I think these different areas that I mentioned, each one is a place that you can start. And so I think home is the most obvious. For me, it didn't necessarily start in the home. For me, it started in the workplace. And that was because that's where I had my aha. For me, I had the aha that work isn't working for me. And I couldn't figure out why, and I couldn't figure out how to fix it. But once I did, I was able to start changing some of those relationships, and I was able to start changing what wasn't working for me. And so I was able to even look at my job and go, this isn't, I don't want to be working crazy hours. I don't want to be taking calls at absurd hours. I don't want to be emailing all hours of the weekend and not enjoying my kids' sports. And so I was able to look at that first as a framework for this is a small thing that I can change. And then started noticing my community at work changing. And so that was the first place for me that started making some changes. And then when that changed, things at home started changing. And so I think it depends where you start having that aha first. And when you have that aha, being brave enough to step out and to start saying, like, okay, I'm going to maybe, take a chance and run the experiment on, making this little tweak or making this little change and seeing if that changes your community. And I think you'll see that it does. And for some people, it might happen at home first, maybe that's where you have your aha, or maybe you have your first aha in your community. And when you have that first aha, like I said, taking that first brave step and then moving in that direction. And I think you'll see that community starts to change. And I think we all know that when the people around us change, we change. And so, I don't think that all of the people around me necessarily changed. But I think that, when we do make that move in that direction and the people around us change, the values of the people around us change, and we start to change in a direction that's more positive. And so, I think that looking for those moments of aha so that you can find the community so that you can start making change in that positive direction.
And it does take a little courage to embody kind. You've said it a couple times. Take that first brave step. The aha moment inside of maybe the work community that you're in or your home community. The aha moment is the the icebreaker moment, but then it takes a little bit of courage. Why do you think it does?
Oh my gosh. Well, because I think that it's so different from what we've been prescribed as a society, right? Like I think our prescription as a society is success and results. And what I was noticing for myself is I was on this ladder of results. And it's so interesting because I think at some point in our life, there's this pivot towards relationships, but that pivot doesn't happen until later in life when we start having those moments where, for some reason, we have some kind of brush with death or brush with our fate. And we're like, oh my gosh, results really aren't as important as we thought. And maybe relationships are more important. And like I said, I feel like I was lucky to have that insight early on in life. I didn't have any, crazy brush with death or, brush with fate or anything like that. It was just something that resonated inside of me. It was that awareness that you spoke of. And so I don't know if people are having that awareness sooner. I don't know if people are coming into that conscious space sooner. Um, I think that really it's about that consciousness though, or that awareness, and that if people can come into that space, then they do find that relationships are what's more important than results. But our society really, if you look at so many spaces, it prescribes that results before the relationships.
Yes, I love everything you said about that. I don't know why that came later in my life as well, but then the realization of it kind of hit me hard. It's like, oh, this is what matters, and it's going to change everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you, because I was tying in the brave to that. And it's like, and you said why. It's because we've been conditioned otherwise, that that's right over there. And so if we think that's right, but what we realize what matters, and those two don't go together, and then
Right.
you have to be brave to make that change.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So okay, I've heard, and I'm sure you have too, I've heard it said that kindness can be mistaken for weakness, and that would
Oh,
be a
yeah.
mistake, wouldn't it? So
Yes.
sometimes we have to step up and set boundaries, and that may not feel very kind in the moment, but tell me how you think about this.
Oh, yeah. So, well, so in my leadership years and in my experience at work, what I was realizing really is that, and actually, I even heard this out loud at times. She's a bitch in the boardroom. And interestingly, now there's a gender gap or gender disparity here, right? Where if a man would have gone in and did the same exact thing that I did in the boardroom, they would have been like, oh my gosh, he's so great. He got us out of here on time. He, set our directives, blah, 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 blah. We got everything done. But a woman does it and it's very different. So I think that there's, one, some gender disparity. I think two, that when we're clear and distinct with our boundaries, people are unsure how to take that at times because we were never taught when we were growing up to be very clear and distinct with our boundaries. Um, Even walking through the hall, and I give this as an example all the time in schools or in organizations, when somebody says, hey, how are you doing? Our response that we've been conditioned with is, okay, when really it might be like, you're awful, you've had a miserable morning, something awful is going on in your life, whatever it is. I mean, we've never really been taught to talk honestly and authentically with each other. And so when we do that in a firm and direct way, people are really unsure of how to take that. And they take it, so then because of that, they can take it personally when it has nothing to do with them. It really has to do with us saying, here's my boundaries, here's what I'm able to do or capable of doing. And I talk about this in the book a little bit in my chapter where I say, I started dealing with chronic illness because I did so much. I would do because I was a yes woman. because that's how I was raised. That's how I think a lot of us were raised. And Gabor Mate says at one point in time in one of his books, he says, if you don't know how to say no, your body will start doing it for you. And so I think that those of us, back to the idea of being brave, those of us who have learned how to and are comfortable setting boundaries, it's really a brave thing to do, even though other people might think, oh my gosh, what is she doing? Or is she so standoffish? Or that's so awful, or I'm so
Well,
put
and
off.
it's the ultimate kindness to yourself,
Yes. And so, yes,
ultimately.
exactly.
Yeah.
Back to that idea of that's exactly how I learned how to be kind to myself, was to set boundaries and to say what's realistic for me and my family and my kids, and how I want my relationships to be, and how I want my legacy to be, and how I want my life to be.
You were making me think of my author friend, Lori Seitz has a podcast called Fine is a 4-letter word, in terms of like
Love
responding with,
it.
I'm fine.
Uh-huh.
Like we're conditioned to just respond with these sort of, I don't even know what that is, but I think being kind to yourself also means you're being authentic with your answers. You're being real with people.
Yes.
Yeah, and which gives them permission to be real with themselves. And, the world is changed right there in that moment that you decided to be real for once. Oh,
Yeah.
and I love that. Yeah, so in our other author interviews about EmbodyKind, we have talked a lot about starting with yourself, and how we've all kind of caught ourselves being kind to everyone else, but
Hmm.
realizing that it wasn't happening here first.
Hmm.
What do you want to say about that?
Yeah. I think that for me, it was years and years of piling up until I got to the point of going like, what the heck is happening inside of here that's not working? Um, and the way I describe it in the book is this disease of not good enough.
Mm,
I was realizing that I was carrying around this weight of something that wasn't working. And what it was is everything I did in my mind wasn't good enough. I had all these accolades. Everybody was always like, everything she does is so great. And she's such a perfectionist and, blah, 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 blah. But I didn't see any of that. Um, Everything I saw was not enough. I remember, and I tell the story in the book, um, walking home from first grade, and it was just under a mile walk. We all used to walk. We didn't have buses that drove us, just little bits of, time and space. But I walked home and it felt like forever. And I was so nervous and my hands were itching and I felt like my face was swollen and all this kind of stuff. And I was nervous because I had a B on my report card. And to me, that was not good enough. And then I got home and the first thing my mom says is, what is this letter? And I said, well, it's a B, the second letter of the alphabet. And because I was already like, so nervous and hyped up. And I think we place so much pressure and stress on ourselves. And I didn't realize that until I was probably in my 30s. And I started getting physically ill, back to, Dr. Mate's quote. And once I started recognizing that and realizing that is when I was able to go, time out, whoa, something's got to change. And that's when I started blaming everyone else around me. Something's got to change. It's everyone else's fault. If everybody else could fall in line, then everything would be great on this team. um, and that's when I thought, I looked inside and I thought, but you're not really happy yourself. Like, what is your part here? And I realized that, if I could change, if there was something in me that could change, what was that thing? And I realized that's what it was. I wasn't being kind to me. And I was finding all the flaws in me. I was finding all the fault in me all the time. I mean, about everything, stupid things, like just the silliest things that you could think of, like, I don't know, I didn't take a shower fast enough. I didn't blow dry my hair fast enough. I didn't, whatever it was, I didn't do right. And so finding that grace but I couldn't find that grace until I changed some practical things in my life. Um, and so once I found that grace and changed those practical things, that allowed space for me to breathe, to be kind to myself.
Yeah, and that is the journey, isn't it? I love hearing you talk about this. It's such important work. All right, you have a lot going on other than this amazing book project. Tell us
Yeah.
about what's up in your world.
Yeah. So the book project kind of grew out of everything else that I have going on. And people said, like, hey, where can I learn more about what you're doing? And I was like, I don't know, like, this is just what I do. And so what I do is it started off with organizational development work. I go into organizations and I teach leadership development, team building. And I really didn't even realize that I was teaching kindness, I guess. I really thought that I was teaching executives kindergarten skills, if I could, kind of rephrase it that way. I was like, hey, well, I'm just teaching people to, like, stay in their lane and use their words and, not knock each other out. I mean, it seemed really simple, but I also realized that somewhere along the line, we lost that kind of work with each other in the rat race for these results. We lost relationship. So that's some of the work that I do. I go into organizations and do that. I then had a woman some years ago reach out to me and say, hey, some of the work that you're doing with organizations is really similar to the work that we're doing with students. Would you be interested? And at first I was like, hell no. I've got kids of my own. I have no desire to be with kids any longer than I need to be. And she said, oh, come on, just, come see what we're doing. And she's a really great friend. And my first thought was, whatever, it's a free trip to California. I love this friend dearly. I get to spend time with her. And I saw what they were doing and I fell in love with it because I was severely bullied in middle school, high school, and this was bullying prevention work. And so since then, I've been working in school, second grade through 12th grade, and I go in and I do either bullying prevention work with staff and students, or I do restorative practice work. And it's just phenomenal. So we learn how to do restorative practice circles. And then I've also started doing some work in homes with partners, relationships, parenting. And so I've got all this going on, which in some ways seems really big and different clientele. But, at the end of the day, like I said, it really all comes back to people being kind to themselves and kind to others. And it's really all interconnected. And I'm super lucky to love what I do.
That's awesome. You guys, make sure and scroll down to our show notes. I have Kristi hooked up there, KristiTrader.com. You can
Awesome.
explore and see about all these things going on, including the book. Um, what are some last words of advice you might have for our listeners, our readers about really, I think people might, they're in different various levels of struggle on this journey.
Mm,
An easy stepping stone, do you think?
yeah. So my practice in the book is pretty simple. And I won't totally give it away, but I think the easiest thing is um, the story that I share in the book about myself is how much I struggled with anxiety. And the best practice I think that I can give a lot of folks is coming into the present moment. And I give you 3 tips and tricks as to how to do that. And I think the easiest thing is when we can come into the present moment, we can really realize, like, we are safe, we are okay. Um, Life is just here the way that it is. No one is typically in immediate danger. And just finding that space to breathe again, to be kind to ourselves. When we can be kind to our bodies, it really helps our health, our physical health, our emotional health. And so I think that's, the first place to start is really to just take a minute, breathe, come into the current space, the current time, and find that way to just kind of give yourself a little hug and be okay with where you're at, and move forward from there.
I love it. Perfect way to start the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here to share this with everyone. Thanks for being in my world. I
Yeah.
appreciate everything that you're doing with this movement and how you really passionately want to educate people in, and really I think it's these little ways in all of those environments that you talked about. It can be such a big difference. It can make such a big difference. So thanks for being, the warrior in that movement. You're
Oh, thank
awesome.
you, Laura. Yeah, I appreciate you too.
So, to our listeners today, our viewers, we're inviting you to the live stream book launch party for EmbodyKind, a guide for authentic living. That's going to be September 30th at 10 a.m. Eastern on the Brave Healer Productions Facebook page. So, I have you hooked up with that link down below as well.
Super.
KristiTrader.com. You can explore Kristi's site and all the things she's talking about today. And of course, if you're listening to this show after that date, well, then you got to hop over to Amazon because that means the book is ready for you and you can
Yay.
make your purchase today. Lastly, today, everyone, I just want you to remember your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. So it's time to be brave. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.